Growing up as a young, first-generation Asian American, my place in the media was sparse to say the least. I was lucky enough that anime became somewhat regularly accessible through late-night TV blocks like Toonami, and that I found shows like Naruto and Yu-Gi-Oh! Or movies like Spirited Away. These things became cultural touchstones that, aside from my family, became some of the major driving forces behind my connection to a world outside of the United States. But also I feel particularly lucky that I grew up in a time where people outside of Asia were being inspired by their narrative exports and letting that influence the Western cartoons they'd go on to make. I think of Samurai Jack and the fact that was created by a Russian American, or Teen Titans, and hell, even the Boondocks. When I was a kid, it was only just beginning, but through shows like these, Eastern animation began to spread its influence into a global phenomenon. But out of all of these titles, one show impacted me by far the heaviest. It was a cartoon that embraced its cultural predecessors and carried them to a new generation. To this day, I could still revisit the series and be amazed by how it reflects ideas still relevant in my experience as an Asian American. At the surface, it was a simple story that bestowed basic but significant life lessons. Things like the importance of second chances or of fighting for what you believe in. But at an even deeper level, it could explore things like propaganda and indoctrination. It was a show that became fundamental to who I'd grow up to be. Of course, it was Avatar: The Last Airbender. Today's video is brought to you by our Patreon and Ryan Tang's Science and Sorcery novels. If you're a fan of this channel, chances are you're a fan of anime and good writing. Look no further than the Science and Sorcery novels for your dose of mecha-inspired political intrigue. If you watched last month's Code Geass video, then you've heard about the first of Ryan's novels, Strength of 1,000. It's a story about humanity trapped in space colonies fighting from the grips of tyranny. Well, today, the sequel to Be an Ace has dropped on Amazon and can be read absolutely free by Kindle Unlimited users or just $3.99 for a digital copy. A physical copy is only $14.99, and we've also included a link to download the Kindle app for free in the description. If you don't have Kindle Unlimited, until May 8th you can get a digital copy of the first novel, Strength of 1,000, for just 99 cents. Support a fellow writer and purchase your copy of the Science and Sorcery novels. Links to everything will be in the description. We also want to thank Straight Idea and all of the other patrons over at patreon.com/KatoYT. Pledge a single $1 and get access to an exclusive patron Discord where you can find me and Zero hanging all the time. Now, back to the video. I remember as a kid watching that behind the scenes video where they had that martial artist explaining the technique behind each bending style and thinking about how incredible it was to see this art form really be showcased and embraced on TV. Obviously films like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon had already made their way to America, and someone like Jackie Chan was a household name, but to a young boy like me, a fantasy epic adventure like Star Wars but with monks and dragons, I'm not talking King Arthur dragons, full Chinese serpent-like creatures, that was mind-blowing. It was everything I had known through my Asian heritage, but out there in the world, something I could point to with a friend and have them actually understand and realize how cool my culture was. Because being Asian wasn't always cool when I was growing up, and arguably it isn't now unless you look like a K-pop star. But what Avatar: The Last Airbender did for a child like me was make me feel normal. It provided representation that I didn't even know I needed. And yet the interesting thing was that for all it did to this young Asian boy, Avatar was still a story created by two white dudes. And don't take that the wrong way, it's really not a criticism, but knowing that, it's interesting to contextualize some of these central themes to the show from that perspective. I just rewatched season 1 of Avatar, and one of the episodes that stood out to me was episode 17, The Northern Air Temple. For those who don't remember, this is the episode where Aang learns that a group of people have settled into a previously defunct airbending sanctuary. It's really an episode about cultural appropriation, and one that I think speaks an important truth that I feel we kind of lost track of. The discourse about appropriation has become vitriolic, in my opinion. There's some who believe there's no such thing, that anyone should be able to adopt whatever hobby or activity they want, and no group of people have ownership over something like a kimono, for example. And there's another group of people who make claims like only specific groups can celebrate certain holidays or appreciate various historical clothing and whatnot. And I think what Avatar teaches us is something a little more nuanced. The Last Airbender is a series about a boy from a deeply traditional culture who is now in a world where that culture is extinct. So much has been forgotten in Aang's 100 years of absence, and his memories of his people are precious to him. It's a series created by Americans that is heavily influenced in all sorts of ways by Asian mythology, Japanese animation, martial arts, and so much more. In some definition of the word, we could call this series an appropriation. Much like Aang in his initial reaction to seeing the mechanical glider soaring around the temple, it'd be easy for some of us to get angry at this idea. Who are these people to bastardize and steal from a culture that isn't their own? They weren't raised here, they didn't suffer here in the way Aang did, they weren't disciplined in the way he was. They're just harvesting the fruit that's been planted and tended to by people carefully over thousands of years. They have no soul, no energy, no spirit. It'd be easy to feel that way. And here's the thing, I do believe it's fully possible for that anger to be sometimes justified. I would find it disgusting to have someone dig into and profit off of a hobby that means nothing to them and everything to someone else. All the time I see people one day making hit after hit off a rap album and then the next day turning around and saying the genre is just trash. It's vulturing for your own gain, and it happens. But I think there's a difference between vulturing and being inspired by something. Throughout the episode, Aang discovers more and more of what the new settlers have done to the Air Temple. Things like destroying ancient murals and tearing down walls for trivial recreation. In examples like this, anger is warranted in my opinion. These people have adopted this land that is really just a bunch of stone to them, but to him it's his history. And even worse, they've taken this idea of soaring through the sky or traveling on the back of a sky bison and have bastardized and weaponized it into a means of warfare. What Avatar tells us is that appropriation done for nothing but profit, personal or economical, is a terrible, terrible thing. When people argue against cultural appropriation, this is what they are afraid of, that a culture of rich history and legacy will become at best a stupid old bathhouse, and at worst something that is completely antithetical and harmful to what it originally stood for. This is a fear that Avatar thinks is real and warranted. But at the same time, I love that this show became such a cultural phenomenon in the West, because it came from a place of respect. It birthed admiration and interest in Eastern culture and mythology. This is the ultimate moral of the Northern Air Temple. Aang is rightfully angry about the warships and the bathhouses, but at the same time, he can't help but admit that Teo, a young boy crippled from the waist down, has found new freedom being able to soar in the sky. He embodies that airbender spirit that we've seen in Aang. And in a way, even though Teo isn't an airbender, he shoulders that legacy and continues it on into the future with people who would have never otherwise been able to. Teo respects and admires the airbenders, and that's what I feel is embodied throughout this entire series. We see similar cultural themes later on being approached in the episode The Firebending Masters. With Zuko's first forays into teaching Aang firebending proving unsuccessful, the duo venture in search of an ancient civilization of sun warriors, said to be the very first humans to master firebending as taught to them by extinct dragons. This was a perspective towards culture that I found incredibly relatable. In a way, I felt connected to Zuko's disconnect with his own ancestry. There's a clear physical line between the sun warriors and the firebending nation that Zuko was born into. Zuko knows of the sun warriors as this historical concept. He is in some way a descendant of them, carrying on the legacy of firebending. But being so separated and living in the culturally distinct world of the Fire Nation, there's a barrier between them. As I watched this episode again, I couldn't help but be reminded of my own experiences as an Asian American born to a family who were a part of a culture that I never was. I grew up in America, but I have this strong connection to the people and traditions of Cambodia. Cambodian culture has influenced the way I was raised, but there's a barrier there. I didn't grow up in Cambodia. The only people surrounding me who did were my mother and grandmother, and as much as they tried to bestow onto me, like Zuko, this idea of my history was really just an abstract concept. But what Avatar The Last Airbender tells us is that it doesn't have to be this way. When Zuko and Aang find the civilization, they have one goal in mind: learn to firebend. It's a superficial, almost predatory motivation. They want to take the gifts of the Sun Warrior so that they can defeat the Fire Lord. A noble cause, but self-motivated with little care for what the Sun Warriors might want. They're met with hostility and harmful traps designed to keep thieves and vultures away from the sacred land. But what Aang and Zuko end up learning is that the Sun Warriors are alive and continue to thrive as a hidden society. And beyond that, so are the dragons long thought to be extinct from firebenders hunting them for fame and glory. Zuko and Aang learn a new perspective on firebending. Their worth is tested by fire and proven through the recognition and honor of a sacred ceremonial dance belonging to the Sun Warrior people. Culture is not something we have to be born with. It's something that can be learned, but it has to be done with proper intent. I know more about Cambodian history and culture now than I ever have, and with that is this deep appreciation for a culture that long predates my existence and will hopefully continue long after I die. Like Zuko, I've chosen to pursue an interest in a side of me that I've long ignored, and because of that, I've been given gifts that are worth more than most things I'll ever own. Avatar The Last Airbender isn't a show made by white people maximized for profit using the rich history of Asia as a means to just sell more toys. It's a show from people that you can tell have so much love and care for what they've borrowed. They aren't quote-unquote my people, but this show did so much for me and my connection to this culture. Avatar teaches that education and appropriation done with love, reverence, and gratitude is something that can enrich the world. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like down below and share it with your friends. I want to give a massive shout out to Straight Idea and all of the other incredible patrons over at patreon.com/KatoIT. Please, if you can, head on over there and give just $1 to get access to our exclusive patron Discord. You could also get our t-shirts over at katomerch.com or follow us on Twitter at @0andhoodie. Links to all of these will be in the description. My name is Hoodie, this is Kato, and I'll see you next week.